That's my mom.
That's my mom. The words sliced through the air like a thunderclap. Zaria Monroe stood frozen in place, her eyes locked on the silver heart-shaped locket swaying gently from the neck of Alastair Rockford, billionaire, tech mogul, and one of the most powerful men in New York. In her hand, a shattered wine glass bled Merlot across the polished marble floor of the Midtown Gala. Her tray had crashed down seconds ago, but the sound didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the miniature portrait inside that locket. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. It was her mother. The mother she hadn't seen since she was 5 years old. The ballroom fell silent. The clinking of forks, the background jazz, the murmured deals worth millions, all gone. Every head turned. Every whisper held judgment. Is she causing a scene? Another girl looking for a payday. Zaria wasn't just a black waitress in a designer room full of white collars. She was a daughter with a face full of pain, courage, and fury. And tonight, the mask cracked. This is not just another dinner gone wrong. This is the beginning of a truth so deeply buried it took a miracle to unearth. Because the man clutching that locket? He wasn't a stranger. And this wasn't a mistake. Welcome to Hidden Worth, where black stories, the ones that were never meant to be told, finally find a voice. What you're about to hear is a story of identity denied, of racism wrapped in wealth, and of one brave young woman who dares to speak a truth everyone else tried to bury. This is not just about a locket. This is about legacy. This is about a family torn apart by lies, and finally brought face to face with the truth. So stay with us. Because once you know what really happened, you won't be able to look away. And if this story stirs something in you, hit that subscribe button and follow Hidden Worth, where the truth is finally told, one untold story at a time. Now, let's begin. Zaria Monroe never fit the mold society laid out for her. At just 23 years old, she had already survived more than most people face in a lifetime. Raised in a crowded group home in the Bronx after her mother vanished without a trace, Zaria learned early on that the world didn't come with safety nets, especially not for black girls without last names that opened doors. She didn't have parents. She didn't have money. What she had was grit, beauty, and a sharp mind that refused to be silenced. By day, Zaria worked double shifts at the Crown Pearl, a high-end Manhattan restaurant known for its celebrity clientele, impossible standards, and unapologetically white staff. She was the only black woman on the floor, and management made sure she never forgot it. She was called the Help more than once, sometimes with a smirk, sometimes with a glare. Customers questioned if she belonged. Supervisors double-checked her orders but never her co-workers. And yet, every night she showed up in pressed slacks, hair slicked into a neat bun, and that signature quiet fire in her eyes. Because this job, as degrading as it sometimes felt, paid her rent. It kept her in the city she refused to abandon. And more importantly, it allowed her to keep dreaming. Zaria was an artist at heart. Between shifts, she sketched faces on napkins, scenes on receipts, colors from memory. Her dream was to one day open her own gallery, a space that told stories like hers. Stories that weren't polished or perfect, but raw, resilient, and real. She had talent. Everyone who saw her work said so. But in a world built on connections and capital, talent wasn't enough. She needed a break. She never imagined that break would come in the form of a silver locket, or that it would lead her to the man who might have the answers to a lifetime of silence. Zaria had no idea her world was about to unravel and realign in the same breath. She didn't know that speaking 5 explosive words, "That's my mom," would flip her entire life upside down. But when you've spent your whole life searching for truth, sometimes the truth finds you first. And for Zaria Monroe, the search was just beginning. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday night shift. The Crown Pearl was buzzing with its usual high society energy. Stockbrokers laughing over cocktails, influencers angling for perfect selfies, and celebrities hiding behind sunglasses at corner booths. Zaria Monroe moved through it all with practiced grace. Her tray balanced, her steps light, her smile trained. She had taken orders from tech billionaires and trust fund babies without flinching. But tonight felt different, and she couldn't explain why. Then he walked in. Alastair Rockford. Even people who didn't read Forbes knew his name. He was the kind of man who made headlines without saying a word. Sharp suit, silver hair, and a presence that made the room go still. He didn't need an introduction. Everyone knew who he was, the CEO of Rockford Dynamics, worth billions, untouchable. Zarya was assigned to his table. She approached with the standard greeting, masking the nerves rising in her chest. He barely looked up, murmuring his drink order, but something about his voice sent a strange chill down her spine. As she leaned in to set the napkin at his place, she noticed it. A silver heart-shaped locket resting against the crisp white of his shirt. It swung slightly when he moved, just enough for the clasp to come undone. And then she saw it. The photo inside. A woman's face, warm brown skin, almond eyes, a distinct birthmark on her left cheek. Zarya's breath caught. Her tray slipped. The wine glass fell and exploded on the floor, red liquid splattering across her shoes. But she didn't care. She was staring at the photo. The image she had memorized from a tattered picture she kept in her wallet. The face she saw in her dreams. The face she thought she'd never see again. Her mother. The room spun. She looked straight at Rockford, pointed at the locket, and said it louder than she intended. "That's my mom." The room went silent. Rockford stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Zarya didn't know how or why this man had that photo. But something deep in her soul told her this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a door cracking open. And she was about to walk straight through it. Zarya Monroe didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. She lay on her worn-down mattress in her one-bedroom walk-up in the Bronx, staring at the ceiling, her mind running in circles. Her phone rested next to her, screen cracked, the same photo pulled up again and again. Her mother, Melina Walker. The only photo she had. The only proof of who her mother was. And now, apparently, not the only copy. Because that same photo, the same eyes, the same smile, the same birthmark, was inside Alistair Rockford's locket. Zarya knew what she saw. And she wasn't about to let it go. By sunrise, she had made a list. It wasn't long, but it was focused. Who is Alistair Rockford? What is his connection to Melina Walker? Why does he have that locket? She dug into every article, blog post, and interview she could find. Most of it was corporate fluff, about acquisitions, IPOs, offshore accounts. Nothing personal. No mention of a woman named Melina. She searched deeper, using public databases, social security archives, and even forums for adoptees. She found one hit. A record showing that Melina Walker had once worked for Rockford Holdings, nearly 24 years ago, as a personal assistant. It was the first and only trace of her mother connected to Rockford. Then, nothing. Zarya's gut told her this wasn't an accident. She didn't believe in fate, but she believed in instincts. And something in her bones said this man had answers. Real answers. She printed what she found, highlighted names, dates, and places. She even circled the words Rockford Holdings in bold red ink like she was preparing for war. Because, in a way, she was. She wasn't going to stand on the sidelines while someone else held pieces of her life. She wasn't going to be the girl who walked away when the truth was finally within reach. No more wondering. No more silence. Zarya was going to confront the man who might know what happened to her mother. And whether he liked it or not, she was going to get the truth. Even if it meant standing face to face with a billionaire. Even if it meant shaking the very foundation of his perfect world. The next morning, Zarya woke up with a mission, and a printed folder clutched in her hands like armor. She put on her cleanest blazer, pulled her curls into a tight bun, and made the hour-long commute from the Bronx to Midtown. Her hands trembled on the subway, but her eyes stayed focused. Today, she would walk into Rockford Holdings and demand answers. At least, that was the plan. The building was a fortress of glass and steel, rising 40 stories into the Manhattan sky. The front lobby glowed with marble floors, chrome railings, and quiet tension. Everyone who walked in wore tailored suits, expensive watches, and expressions that said "I belong here." Zarya walked in holding her folder and her breath. She approached the front desk. "Fi," she began, her voice steady. "I need to speak to Mr. Rockford. It's personal." The receptionist didn't even look up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." But it's urgent. It's about someone named Melina Walker. That got her attention, just for a second. Then came the smirk. You think you can walk into a billion-dollar company without an appointment and just see the CEO? Zarya opened her mouth to explain, but another voice cut in from behind. I think she's confused. Maybe she's looking for housekeeping. It came from a man in a navy suit. Tall, smug, expensive. He looked Zarya up and down like she was an insect on his windshield. Laughter rippled from the security desk. Zarya's throat tightened. I'm not here for a job, she said sharply. I'm here for answers. Well, sweetheart, the man replied. Maybe try customer service. Or better yet, YouTube. That's where all the conspiracy theories go these days. Before she could respond, a security guard appeared. Nam, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Zarya stood her ground. I'm not leaving until. But she didn't finish. Because two guards were already escorting her toward the door. People stared. Some with curiosity. Others with annoyance. A few with open disgust. Outside, the wind was colder than before. Zarya stood on the sidewalk, humiliated, furious, and more certain than ever. They could laugh. They could drag her out. But they couldn't stop her from uncovering the truth. Not now. Not ever. Zarya had barely made it to the corner of 5th and East 49th before the weight of it all started to hit. She kept walking, head down, jaw clenched, until the glass towers around her blurred behind angry tears. But just as she reached for her phone, ready to call the one friend she trusted to talk her down, she heard a voice behind her. Miss Monroe. She turned sharply. A man in a dark gray coat stepped toward her, cautious but not hostile. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Clean cut. Professional. Not security. I saw what happened, he said quietly. I'm Marcus Langston. I work for Mr. Rockford. His executive team. Zarya's posture stiffened. Marcus glanced around. I don't have long, but I think you should see something. Without waiting for permission, he pulled a folded photograph from his coat pocket. Old. Worn. Sepia-toned from time. He handed it to her. Zarya stared at it in disbelief. It was her mother. Younger. Smiling. Standing beside a much younger Alistair Rockford on a beach. They weren't just co-workers. They looked like Nia. A soft breeze blew through the street, but Zarya couldn't feel it. Where did you get this? She asked. Marcus kept his voice low. I found it years ago in an old archive drawer. No one talks about her. But I remember seeing her once. Melina. She worked for Mr. Rockford in the early 90s. Brilliant. Beautiful. She just vanished. Zarya clutched the photo like it was gold. She didn't vanish, she whispered. She was my mother. Marcus studied her face. I believe you. Why are you helping me? She asked. He hesitated. Because some truths don't deserve to stay buried. And you look exactly like her. Zarya's hands shook. Marcus pulled a business card from his wallet. I can't get you a public meeting. But there's a private event tomorrow night at the Rockford estate. I'll make sure you get in. Zarya blinked. Why? Because, he said, if Rockford really knows what happened to your mother, you deserve to look him in the eye when you ask. And with that, Marcus turned and disappeared into the crowd. Zarya stood still, gripping the photo and the card. For the first time since this whole thing began, she didn't feel alone. The Rockford estate didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress. Perched on the edge of Westchester County, the mansion stretched across rolling acres, surrounded by towering trees and iron gates that whispered money and secrecy. Zarya stood at the back entrance, clutching the photo Marcus had given her and the guest pass tucked inside her clutch. The inside of the estate was even more overwhelming. Vaulted ceilings, golden chandeliers, and guests dressed like royalty. Waitstaff moved silently through the room, the air thick with old money and curated smiles. Zarya didn't belong here. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here for one reason, Alistair Rockford. She spotted him near the fireplace, locked in conversation with a board member. He didn't notice her at first. She waited. Then, when the moment was right, she stepped forward. "Mr. Rockford," she said. His eyes met hers. For a second, nothing. Then, a flicker. Recognition. Pain. Fear. She handed him the photograph. The same one Marcus had given her. Her voice didn't shake. "I think we need to talk. About Melina Walker." Alistair stared at the photo for a long moment. His hand trembled slightly, the edges of his composure fraying. He motioned toward the hallway. They walked in silence into a private study. Heavy doors closed behind them. "You knew her," Zarya said. "You loved her, didn't you?" Alistair didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire, eyes far away. "I did," he finally said. "More than anything." "Then why did she disappear?" Zarya's voice rose. "Why was I raised in a group home while you were out building empires?" Alistair turned slowly. "You're her daughter?" Zarya nodded. He swallowed hard. "I didn't know she had a child. Melina." She left without a word. "One day she was gone. My family, my father, he hated that I was with her. Said it would ruin everything. There were threats, lies. And then, she was gone." "You didn't look for her?" "I did," he said quietly. "But not enough. Not the way I should have." Silence settled between them like ash. Zarya stepped closer. "Well, now you know. And I want the truth. All of it." Alistair closed his eyes. For the first time, the powerful man looked small. "There's more," he whispered. "Things you don't know. Things I've kept buried for 20 years. Zarya crossed her arms. "Then start digging." Alistair Rockford didn't speak for a long time. He paced slowly across the private study, eyes darting between the window and the floor, like he was watching ghosts only he could see. Zarya stood still, her arms crossed, the silence pressing down like a storm about to break. "When I met Melina," he began, "I was 25, fresh out of grad school, trying to prove something to my father. She was working as an executive assistant. Smart, driven, kind. Way too good for the world I came from." He looked at Zarya then, his eyes softer now. "We fell in love. Quietly, at first. But you know how that goes. You think you can hide it, protect it. But some things don't stay hidden." Zarya didn't move. She let him talk. "My father found out. He called her names I won't repeat. Said a Rockford couldn't be seen with a black woman. That it would ruin everything, our reputation, our investors, our future." He paused. "I told him I didn't care. But Melina, she did. She knew what that kind of pressure could do. To both of us." Alistair walked to a cabinet, pulled out a thin file. Old paper, yellowed at the edges. "I didn't know she was pregnant," he said. "Not until Marcus told me yesterday. That you were her daughter." Zarya blinked, her throat tightening. "She disappeared in the spring of '02. I tried to track her down. Called every number I had. Hired a private investigator. Nothing. A few years later, I heard rumors she'd been admitted to a mental health facility upstate. I dismissed it. I didn't want to believe it." He handed her the file. Inside was a record from a private clinic, Northwood Psychiatric Center. Melina Walker. Admitted in May 2002. Diagnosed with delusional behavior, emotional instability. Zarya's heart dropped. "She wasn't unstable," she said. "She was terrified." Alistair nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "She was institutionalized against her will. My father pulled strings. He had her committed." Tears welled in Zarya's eyes. "And a fire?" she asked. "There was a fire at the clinic in 2015, he said. Several lives lost. Her name was listed among the unconfirmed." "Nobody?" Zarya asked. He shook his head. "No closure. No funeral. Just ashes." Zarya closed the file. This wasn't just about abandonment. It was about erasure. And for the first time in her life, she realized her mother hadn't left her behind. She had been taken. The days that followed moved slowly. Zarya tried to go back to her life, back to waitressing, back to painting between shifts, back to pretending like everything was the same. But it wasn't. She had answers now. Cheruby, heavy answers. The kind that changed everything and fixed nothing. Then, one evening, she got a call from Marcus. "Check the news," he said. She did. And there it was, broadcasted across every major outlet. Alistair Rockford had released a personal statement to the press. In it, he publicly acknowledged a past relationship with Melina Walker, and more shockingly, confirmed that he had recently learned of a daughter born from that relationship, Zarya Monroe. The media went wild. Some praised him for stepping up. Others accused him of trying to clean his image. Zarya didn't care about public opinion. She wanted to know what he was going to do beyond words. The next day, a formal invitation arrived at her apartment. It was handwritten. From Alistair himself. He asked her to attend a private event at the Rockford Foundation headquarters. When she arrived, she didn't know what to expect. What she saw was unexpected. A new scholarship program was being launched in Melina Walker's name. Fully funded, offering full-ride tuition and mentorships for young black women pursuing careers in the arts, social justice, and mental health. Alistair took the stage. "I failed someone I loved," he said. "And I allowed fear, privilege, and silence to do irreparable harm. I can't change what happened to Melina. But I can try to honor her legacy by investing in the kind of future she wanted for others." He looked directly at Zarya. "She gave me something I never knew I had. A daughter. A truth. A second chance." After the ceremony, he approached her quietly. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "But if you're open to it, I'd like to get to know you. No pressure. No headlines. Just as two people trying to repair something broken." Zarya didn't answer right away. She didn't owe him anything. But she also knew that healing doesn't start with perfection. It starts with accountability. And in that moment, something inside her softened, not for his sake, but for hers. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. The moment Alistair Rockford's statement went public, and Zarya's name was mentioned, social media exploded. News outlets ran endless cycles of speculation, analysis, and opinion. Talk shows debated whether she was a victim or an opportunist. Bloggers picked apart her past, her job, even her outfits. Zarya hadn't asked for the spotlight. She had only wanted the truth. But now, she was the center of a storm she never signed up for. And it wasn't just digital noise. People stared at her differently on the subway. Some whispered behind her back at the restaurant. Others weren't subtle. A woman walked up to her table during a lunch shift and muttered, "Bet you're real proud of yourself. Climbing your way up on a dead woman's name." The comment hit her like a slap. It wasn't just about her. It was about race. About how quickly society turns when a black woman steps outside the box they built for her. Zarya went quiet. She stopped answering reporters. Deleted her social media. Stayed off the radar. But she didn't stay silent. Instead, she picked up her pencil and started to draw. Night after night, she poured everything she felt onto canvas. Grief, rage, injustice, hope. She painted Melina as a warrior, not a victim. She painted the locket. The fire. The silence. The truth. Her work caught attention. One of her pieces, titled "The Cost of Silence," was accepted into a group show at a Brooklyn gallery. It drew a crowd. Critics called it haunting, real, necessary. Zarya never once took the stage. She let her art speak for her. Then, one night, standing alone in the gallery after closing, she felt someone walk in behind her. Alistair. He didn't speak. He simply stood in front of the painting of Melina, his eyes red, hands shaking. After a long pause, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Zarya turned to him. She had heard that phrase so many times it had lost meaning. But something about the way he said it, broken, quiet, unguarded, landed differently. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said. "But I'm ready to live beyond the pain." And that was enough, for now. Because forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a road you walk, one honest step at a time. A year later, Zaria Monroe stood on a stage she never imagined reaching. The room was filled with artists, scholars, donors, and community leaders. People who had spent their lives fighting for beauty, justice, and truth in all its forms. She had been nominated for the Emerging Voice in American Art Award, a national recognition for young artists who were using their work to challenge the status quo. She hadn't prepared a speech. She didn't think she'd win. But when her name was called, she didn't hesitate. She stepped to the microphone, her hands calm, her voice clear. "I never thought I'd be here," she began. "And honestly, for most of my life, I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know where I came from, or who I came from. I just knew I had something to say." The room was silent. I grew up in a world that tried to erase my mother's voice. That told me I was too much, too loud, too angry, too black. But my mother, Melina Walker, she was everything I hoped to become. Brave, brilliant, and full of love. She paused. And even though the world tried to silence her, she still speaks. Through me. Through every brushstroke. Through every truth I paint into the light. In the back of the room, Alistair Rockford stood alone. He didn't make a scene. He didn't come as a CEO. Just a man learning to live with what he lost. Zaria met his eyes for just a second. No anger. No bitterness. Just truth. And to every young girl who's been told she's too different to matter, Zaria said, remember this, your story is not too small. Your voice is not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too anything. You are exactly enough. Applause erupted, not just for her art, but for her courage. She walked off stage with her head held high, the weight of silence no longer on her shoulders. Zaria Monroe was no longer just a waitress. No longer just a name in someone else's shadow. She was an artist. A truth teller. A daughter. A legacy. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. Not every story ends with a perfect bow. Not every pain can be fixed. Not every absence can be filled. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. Zaria Monroe didn't ask to become a symbol. She didn't seek fame. She didn't want a spotlight. All she ever wanted was the truth. What she got was something deeper. She learned that truth doesn't always come wrapped in justice. Sometimes it's messy, uncomfortable, even heartbreaking. But it's still yours. And once you claim it, no one can take it away again. She learned that silence, especially when it's forced upon you, can be more violent than words. That entire lives can be erased, rewritten, or buried, unless someone is brave enough to dig. And maybe the most important thing she learned? That forgiveness isn't weakness. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the past. It's about choosing not to let the past hold your future hostage. Zaria chose to build, not just for herself, but for the generations coming behind her. Through her art, through her story, and through every young voice she now mentors, she's turning pain into purpose. Her mother, Melina Walker, will never be forgotten again. And the locket that once held a hidden truth? Now it hangs in a museum. A permanent reminder of a voice once silenced, now echoing louder than ever. So, what does this mean for us, for you? It means your story matters. No matter where you come from, no matter what you've been through, your truth is not too small, too late, or too complicated to matter. Speak it. Paint it. Write it. Live it. Because when you own your story, you give others permission to do the same. And sometimes, that's how healing begins. If Zaria's journey moved you, if it reminded you of your own story, or someone you know, don't let it end here. There are thousands of voices like hers waiting to be heard. Waiting for someone to say, I see you. I believe you. At Hidden Worth, we share real Black stories that were never meant to stay buried. And every time you like, comment, or share, you help bring those voices forward. So if this story spoke to you, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below. Tell us what part hit you the hardest. And come back next week for another story that just might change how you see the world. Because truth, when spoken out loud, is never just a story. It's a revolution.